Now, let's begin with the current cybersecurity threat environment. As someone who's had a front row seat to the attacks we face, what are some of the most concerning ones you think we should be paying attention to right now?
Oof, look, that's a huge question. There's so many, but maybe we just touch on one or two.
Hmm.
I mean, I was here earlier this year, I think,
Yeah.
when we were talking about trends to look out for in 2024, and I spoke about third party, and I still think that that is one to watch out for. In July, we also what happened with the Microsoft and CrowdStrike episode, right? It was not really a cyber attack, but it just showed how much reliance the world sort of had placed on third party.
Hmm.
And really, flights couldn't work, ATMs were not working. This was a global problem. So I think third party issues and the entire supply chain piece will just continue to be a huge problem. With AI, phishing has just become a lot more sophisticated. So you can no longer just be able to depend on the basic things we sort of used to say, get a phishing email, look at the grammar, look at things like that. Now it's a machine versus machine conversation because only machines now can really detect when a phishing email is trying to deceive you. So I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time. What we find is really that it's kind of the same thing, but the methods are changing. Because, for example, certain organizations are putting in so much money into their security. What we are seeing now is, you know what, rather than disrupt one organization, for example, how can we disrupt things on a massive scale? So in London, for example, some months back, different hospitals typically use a particular third party to go do blood tests. Okay, so depending on how critical your condition is, they take you to this place to go do blood test, a lab. Now that lab was hacked, and 70% of the hospitals in London could no longer attend to patients the following day. Why? Because you could no longer trust the data in the systems. All of a sudden, if Olaimi, if both of us had gone to the hospital to say previously to do a check and we said, oh, we were compatible. Now, because the data has been hacked and manipulated, the doctors were not willing to take the risk to say you are still
Um,
compatible post the hack. So nobody was doing blood transfusion. It was total chaos. So I would say that that is a real trend we're seeing. Rather than break into one hospital, how do we cause confusion on a larger scale? So third parties have really become, I think, the new attack vectors, like we like to call them.
well, Dr. Sakwe, let's switch this conversation up a bit, right? Seeing as it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So let's go to the role of leadership in cybersecurity. From your experience, how crucial is leadership when it comes to establishing strong cybersecurity practices in an organization?
Oh, leadership is everything, like we like to say. But I think it's probably easier to talk about this from a public and private sector perspective, just so I don't cut anyone out. So leadership really, if there's no what you call the tone from the top, sort of like the chief executive of the state or the chief executive of a company, lending support to cybersecurity initiatives, it will never work. You must understand, for example, that the reason why you have a police checkpoint is not for you to move faster. Sadly, it's going to make your journey slower. That is kind of what security is not to accelerate decision making in the organization. It is to check that we're doing the right things before we take the decision. So it's not going to be loved, except there is some support from executives. One of the big security bodies is called ISACA. They did the research and they found out across the globe, they checked with 500 CFOs and CEOs, and they found out that the reason, sadly, why most executives and leadership, people in management supported cybersecurity incidents were because an attack had already happened. So we need to be more proactive.
You're absolutely right because it's not about whether you think you need it, like you definitely need it. So, Dr. Osakwe, for leaders who may not have a deep, technical background but are responsible for the security of their company's data, are there common mistakes or blind spots that they often have when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yes, I think one of them. There are several. One of the things I do many times is speak to boards about security for their companies. And the first thing you would find is where in the scale of all the problems we are facing do we put this one? Okay. You also need to think about it like the governor of a state. Where there's insecurity, there are other things. Where do we place cyber? And I think that that is the question that is happening at the management and at the board level and at the executive level, where with all the economic problems, financial issues, liquidity issues, security, where do we place cybersecurity? And I think that the danger is that we are not giving it the attention it deserves. And that is why, if you notice, for the last 3 years, consistently, the cost of a cybersecurity breach has been going up by over 30%. And now, what the World Economic Forum says is that the cybercrime industry is the third largest economy in the world after US and China. So we don't pay attention to it, it could become number one. So I think the point here is it has to be paid attention to.
Dr. Osakwe, you're absolutely right, because when we look at the statistics, we see that increase, like you said, and of course, that is that
Mm,
30% every year is quite a lot. But bringing this home,
yeah.
Africa has, its own unique set of challenges and, of course,
Oh,
opportunities when it
yes.
comes to cybersecurity. What do you think the future holds for cybersecurity across the continent, and how can we best prepare for it?
Oh, so what the future holds for Africa? Allow me, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm just sorry
Right.
to say so, and I'm not sure I'll be able to touch on the good, the bad, and the ugly. So maybe I touch on the good and maybe a little bit of the bad. The bad, and then we'll go to the good. There's the ugly side to this conversation. The bad is that I don't think we're doing enough. We have, and it's the flip side of the good, because one good is we have a youth population that are willing to learn about tech. Okay, so I mean, in the West, they're kind of aging. So Africa really has a massive youth population that should now be the next frontier. But the flip side of it, which is the bad, is that I think just about 20% of the universities in Nigeria teach cybersecurity. And this is not just even in regards to cyber, this is with all the other things that are still emerging in our market, blockchain, all those things. Just about 15 to 18% of Nigerian universities teach these technologies. So you have this population that should be empowered because there is a cybersecurity gap in terms of skill level across the world. Now you have a continent that has the population at the right age, but then they are not being educated. So it's a tough place to be in. But I think that ultimately, if we are able to leverage, thought leaders and the amount of information there is online, I really think that Africa holds the key to the talent shortage in cybersecurity in the world.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's just about cybersecurity, but when we talk about AI and
Yeah.
IoT and other sectors, Africa definitely
Mm,
fintech. We are quite crucial when it comes to that talent pool. But on a
100%.
personal level, right? We are talking about cybersecurity awareness month, and of course, it's all about the awareness, enlightening the people. Now, we hear a lot about cyber hygiene, keeping ourselves safe online, right? What do you think is the most underrated aspect of personal cybersecurity that people often overlook?
Oh, so I mean, I don't know that there's one. There are several, but maybe we touch on one, especially since we are bringing it home to
Mhm.
Africa. Allow me, one of the challenges in our country is infrastructure. Okay, so I would rather go to a park where there is a free Wi-Fi because I will not pay for it than use my data in my house because I probably don't even have data because they're just economic issues. Okay, so um, one of the research we did some months back, we found out that the amount of rogue Wi-Fi in Nigeria is just astronomical. And one of the times I was able to demonstrate to some of the board members exactly easy it is to steal your password when you connect to a Wi-Fi. It happens in about 10 to 15 seconds. It's
I
the
was actually
easiest
gonna,
thing.
mention that when you spoke about going to a park to use your Wi-Fi because they're not exactly secure.
Exactly, exactly. So for me, that's one of the concerns, and I think generally it's just probably because of the low level of awareness and training. But
Mhm.
you also need to consider the economic situation too. So there's that balance. But I would say that that is one. Just because people are not really very aware about what the risks are, they're just able to jump into things. The second one I would say very quickly in 30 seconds is that I don't think that we have gotten to a place where data subjects, who are the people who own data, like me and you, who go and register for a service with a particular institution, and the data processor, which are the institution that now uses our data, I don't think we've gotten to a place where the data subjects know their rights and the institutions understand their responsibility. That's another thing we need to get to.
But how can we then train ourselves to recognize when something's not quite right, especially when it comes to our data?
Yeah, so when it comes to data, I mean, the regulations are there, I would think, but I think one of the things to remember is that as a subject, rather, you have the right to actually, one, request that your data should be deleted. It's your right. Two, request that your data should be forgotten. Three, request that your data should be erased. Okay, but many times, so this is why you know, in the in the West, you see them being fined for data breaches and things like that. Is because, for example, someone could go report and say, you know what, I subscribed to an email from you to be able to receive HR vacancies, but now from the same company, I am getting notifications of some of the products you sell. You get fined for that because now you've taken my data against my wish to do something else with it, which I did not subscribe to. You know, so it's called explicit and explicit consent. So I mean, these are things that hopefully we begin to enforce in our country.
Well, I guess, that's where the awareness comes in, to keep enlightening people
100%.
on how best to stay secure online. Thank you so much, Dr. Fene Osakwe, member of the Forbes Technology Council. It was a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you very much, Lami. It was a pleasure being here too.